Hello, this is my autobiography called Look in the Shadows, and this is chapter 11 called Crucial Information. I had no idea at the time how crucial moving to this new church would be in relation to the rest of my life, and how my life would be changed as a result of this decision. It would become the platform that would launch me into the future. A future with no going back. It would be like a one-way journey to Mars, going into the unknown with no return ticket. I guess it was like the early explorers of long ago who would venture into new lands, never to return. There was a lot of healing that would also take place. My daughter and I had many unanswered questions about the scriptures. In particular was the role of women in the church and their position in marriage. By this stage, my unhappy marriage had lasted 28 years. I had tried to be the submissive housewife. I had kept my mouth shut for much of the time about how I felt and tried to keep a general sense of peace in the household. Whilst there would be periods of unrest, I tried not to rock the boat, and so there was not an outright war going on. From the outside, all would have appeared normal. I was totally shocked one day when the senior pastor from this new church came and spoke to me. Not just for a brief hello, but actually sat down and had a meaningful conversation with me. This had never happened to me before. In my previous churches, the pastors never spoke to you on a Sunday, or much at all for that matter. They always whisked away to meet other more pressing needs. And I was never important enough to ever have a conversation with them, other than to say hello. We started to talk about some of the issues that concerned us, and this would lead to many discussions in the future that would totally transform my view of faith and many of the scriptures. In particular, it transformed my view of my role in marriage. I came to learn that my views of the submissive housewife were quite in error. I learned that marriage was a partnership and was not about the wife being subservient to the husband. The way that he had been previously put to me was a misinterpretation of Scripture. The pastor gave me a book to read that was written by an Australian theological scholar, a man who had studied the original texts in details on this topic. And what he had to say gave a very different interpretation of the scriptures that have so often been used to oppress women over thousands of years. Right from when I was a new Christian, I had been told that a wife must obey her husband. Even on my wedding day, the message preached at the wedding was solely about a wife obeying her husband. The husband's responsibilities, though mentioned, were not the main emphasis. It was all about the wife's submission. I wondered at the time why the pastor would choose such a controversial topic, as he had not previously come across to me as being a misogynist. At the time, I felt quite embarrassed, as we had many non-Christian guests in the service, and this sort of message was way out of kilter with societal thinking. I wanted my Christian faith to be a witness to them, not something that was depicted as being weird. This information from my new pastor explained why I had been so unhappy and why my needs had never been met in the marriage. It amazed me that these views came from what was supposedly a more traditional, conservative church, whilst the oppressive views had come from the Pentecostals, which I considered to be a more liberated church. It totally blew my mind. It also released me from a bondage that had reduced me to a human being of nothingness. It was the vital information that I needed to enable me to go through the healing process. It was the information that I needed to be able to transform into what God wanted me to become. I was a soul being resurrected from the ashes. I will be forever grateful for the time that this pastor gave to me and for the healing that transformed my life. I had never understood why living according to what I thought was God's law would produce such an unhappy life. But it now started to make sense. It was like having someone switch on a light. It was like having one's eyes opened for the first time. It was amazing to be in a smaller church where people formed closer relationships, where people cared about each other, where people noticed if you were not there, where the pastor would actually sit down and have a conversation with you. It was so liberating, but also incredibly depressing. Depressing to think that the church had had a role to play in essentially destroying my life, in robbing me from what I could have become, in draining the potential totally out of my life, in reducing me to the mere shell of a human being. I understood the plight of so many women who have experienced the same sort of oppression. I know that this is a controversial matter and that many people will disagree with me, even women, and that is okay. We all have different opinions, and we are all at different places in our walk with God. If someone had expressed this thinking to me as a young Christian, I would have aggressively disagreed. I had to be broken in order to change. I had to be mellowed. And this happened to me on many fronts. One day I will find out if I am right or if I am wrong. That is the risk that I have to take. I could have it horribly wrong. But what I do know is that I could not go on living how I was. I would rather die than stay in the prison that my life had become. I needed to fly, even if it was unto death, even death in eternity. I wanted to fly and become the real person that I am, even if only for a brief moment in time, to be true unto myself, no matter the cost. I had no idea at the time how high that cost would be, but that will be revealed in the chapters still to come.